So this is where I'm at so far. I've gotten most of the damage wrapped up around the nose at this point, and this has been a process, basically a very time-consuming process of having to manipulate the styrene, cut it, reform it, take it back off, form it again, basically keep shaping it. I took a little bit of heat too and kind of softened it. I used a little plastic cement to re-strengthen it, but I just basically kept making some notches, and then I just basically bent it around the nose to conform it to the nose and the pilot. And on the front piece here, I went ahead and started at this end first. This is the front piece that's going to basically fit over the pilot. You guys can see it's formed to look like the front part of the debris. And this took a little bit of time to cut out. I'm going to reinforce this with some CA and a little bit of cement too. I basically cut these a little longer than I needed them to. That way I can have the most ease when bending them. But I originally had this piece connected to the front half of this piece on the nose. This was all one piece, right? So the issue I had was once I glued it, I wasn't able to bend this out upwards enough. It stuck straight up in a way. So I decided to make some pilot sheets, which I was going to do anyway for reinforcement. But I went ahead and cut this front piece off, this larger section, and I made some reinforcing strips here that look like debris underneath. And this is basically going to support it. So if I can demonstrate this, when I glue this on, it'll look something like this. I've cut some notches out as well to match the contour of these pieces, and it's going to basically slide on like this. I'll glue it in place, and then I'll build all this back up with styrene. This is all going to be covered up in the multitude of the pile of debris anyway, so this is basically my plan at the moment. I'll come back in a second and show you guys once this is mounted and we can start adding some. So with the front sheets installed, it's time to start building up these little areas here and filling in this gap, and we'll start piling up the debris around the nose here. And I'm going to go ahead and start by filling in this corner here with a piece of styrene that I cut. And I'm basically going to mount it something like that. Kind of roughly here. Sort of want to tuck it up in this corner. Kind of like that. There we go. So once I know what it's going to look like, I can tack this piece on with some glue. I'm using straight CA, by the way. And this is basically the process I'm going to repeat for all these individual little pieces. I know it seems kind of daunting right now, but once you get in the groove of things, it doesn't usually take too long, but you just really have to be patient. But once I get it in place, I'm just going to leave it there, and I'll fall behind and get some more glue. Alright, so I've started to add some wire pieces here, and I just glued this in place, but these represent the strands of wire. There's like some sort of cabling or something all over this debris. You can see it's starting to take shape here. I'll show you guys the rest of this in a minute, but as I keep going, I'll keep layering more and more debris on this until it looks about right. But it's just a matter of going back. I'm just trying to make all of these little shapes and everything from scratch, from individual little pieces of styrene, as you can see. Sorry I couldn't make more clips here. It's kind of hard doing this, but I'm just basically adding one little piece at a time to this until I get it relatively accurate to how it looks on the prototype photos. But I'm just going back again, like I said, at this point, adding the final little bits and pieces. So I'm just going to try to kind of tuck this in here. But this piece is basically going to go on top of the cable here. I'm just kind of trying to cover up any little areas like this on top here where this cable sticks out. I just want to cover that and make it look like it's just all buried in debris. It's just really a whole mess of parts and stuff. It's just that extra illusion of depth here. Alright, so now you guys can basically see what I've done here after all those parts are installed. I've got all the filler pieces in, all individually cut. I used some thinner styrene. I used 0.5-inch styrene to build up the finer little bits and pieces, like all the bent debris and everything. To get this, you can see the front plates installed. Again, you can kind of see how I join that together underneath here. But it's looking really good. You guys can see all that damage. I'll have to put some MU cables in here because the MU cables on this side of the engine are visible in the movie, so I'll have to add those when I get to it. But at this point, I'll just do some final touch-up and we're pretty much ready for paint. I'll just go back and add some glue here and there, soften the joints so you guys can see all the debris. I'll test fit the cab as well to kind of see where I'm at with this. And make sure that, you know, just really before I do any kind of final gluing, making sure that everything's going to work right. But you guys can see all that debris up on the nose as well. All individual cut pieces. So with everything looking good pretty much on the nose here, all the damage is in place. I double checked with prototype photos to make sure everything, absolutely everything, is where it should be. And it looks pretty good. It's as close to the real thing as it's going to get. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start masking it off. You can see I've already kind of taped up the battery box doors, and I got the front of the cab, around behind the cab, the clean air room, stuff like that. I don't want all this to be black, but some black paint's going to get onto it. I just want to cover up some of these areas in the back. There will be some overspray on like the steps and everything, but keep in mind I'm going to be hand painting it, so a little black on this is going to be okay anyway. But what I'm going to do now, I will take a plastic bag. You guys can see to cover all this up would be a heck of a job. It'd take a lot of a tape, but this is just kind of a quick tip. If you guys want to do something, if you guys are going to spot paint an area like this, you can just mask the front little bit off with some tape, but the rest you can do with like a plastic grocery bag. So in this case I have a Walmart bag, and I'm going to basically take this, if I can grab my Scotch tape, I'm going to pull out a sheet of Scotch tape here. And I'm going to wrap this bag around the shell. But this is a good way to do this if you don't want to use all that masking tape. I do this on all kinds of projects. It really saves you a lot of time, a lot of headache, saves material. As you guys know, I love to save material. I don't like having to go out and buy stuff like tape every, 3 weeks. So this is just a way to kind of preserve the tape, keep everything covered up. I'll go ahead and tuck the rest of this bag into the shell here. But essentially, this is all ready for black paint. So we'll go ahead and paint this real quick. Okay, so I have the engine down here in my basement. I lost my paint shop, so I ended up having to resort to doing some painting in my basement here. Thankfully, this is a pretty minimal project. Basically, I'm going to paint this debris black, straight black. We'll do all the other effects like weathering and stuff later. Now, the black paint I'm going to use is this stuff. I get this from Walmart. This is like 59 cents a can, but this is some really good flat black spray paint. I mean, it does a great job. It's really thin. It's the equivalent of if you airbrushed thin black on this, but it works really well. I'm basically going to give this whole thing a couple coats. I've warmed up the can in some warm water for about 5 minutes. Shook it pretty well, and I'm ready to spray it here. I have it set up on a box. I'm basically going to just try to cover all the angles first. I'm not worried about detail right now. Like I said, we'll go back and touch up most of this stuff later, but I'm just going to go and give these parts a few quick sprays. Again, with any kind of paint like this, don't flood the area. Just do little bits at a time and take your time. That's the key with this. Don't try to rush any of these steps. And I'm just going to basically let this first coat dry, and I'll apply a couple more angles.
So with all this work done on the front, we can now begin to paint the sides of the engine, the main car body brown. And basically what I decided to do is hand paint this. I know it's a little bit different and it's not a very good finish if you hand paint stuff, but acrylic's pretty thin and it'll work pretty well. It's also kind of prototypical too, because this is basically how they painted the movie engine. They just basically rolled on some brown paint and then put snow effects on it. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I'm using 3 different brushes. And I'm using my good brushes here. My Citadel Dry Large, this guy. My Citadel Small Dry, this one. And a round liner brush for any detail work. So these 3 right here, and then I'm going to be painting the thing with my Earth Brown Anita's acrylic. So, just going to get a little bit on the brush.
I'm going to basically apply it directly to the primer. I'm going to put one coat on at a time. I'm going to clear coat over it to seal it in place, and then I'll put another coat over that, and another coat if necessary. The brown covers pretty well, so I shouldn't have too many problems with it. And this is basically the main car body color, the base color. So I can darken this a little later. But the first coat, I'm just going straight brown, and I'm just going to kind of roughly start painting this on. So in some of our downtime, I have to wait in between coats while the shell dries here, for the paint to dry, I mean. And we need to work on the cab a little bit. I want to put some washes on this. Now, the reason I bring up washes, we need to alter the color of the cab a little bit, make it look a little bit more grimy, and put a brown color on it without actually, you know, taking a brush to it and actually physically painting it and leaving brush strokes and everything. The best way to do this and to alter the color just very lightly is with a wash. So I'm going to take my brown, and you guys basically know how I do a wash. I'm just going to take a little bit of paint, dilute it down with some water like this, and I'm going to kind of mix it together here. Do a little test here, and I'm basically just going to kind of brush it on here and there in certain little areas. And this is going to help give that more rusty kind of black tone that we need. You could do it with powder too, but I don't necessarily want to get into powder weathering yet. We can enhance it if we need to, but I really want to have an actual base color here for this. So I'm just going to go through and just start applying some washes in various layers to get those grime effects for now. With some washes applied to the cab now, we can go ahead and start washing up the black on the nose and some of this debris as well. I'm just going to dilute it down a little bit. I'm going to make a kind of a splotchy wash on the nose here. And then I'm going to take some water and dilute this down even further, but I'm just kind of randomly putting this on the nose to cover it. But this will look a lot better once it's dry. It looks crappy at first, obviously, but you just gotta give it some time. Okay, so the paint's on. I'll get a little bit of water, and I'll start kind of taking some of it off. I'm just keeping this really thin, though, really thin. I'll do this on the opposite side as well. As it starts to kind of set up, I'll just start blotching it a little bit. I might even switch to a little bit bigger brush on some of this debris, but I'm just going to basically hit all this up here. I'll start inlaying some black washes down the sides of the engine now. You guys saw my SD60 weathering video. This is basically the same idea. You just roughly put in some washes, and we'll come back and take most of these off in a second. But this is just to put some more depth in it, make it look a little bit more grimy, like in the movie. Alright. So, now that we've applied them, we can take them off gently. Just taking off the washes with a Q-tip. Let's see. I do have a clear coat underneath this paint, so it won't take off the acrylic base underneath, but I still have to be kind of careful. I don't want to scrub this too hard because it can still take some of that paint off. But I just want to be kind of careful here. Let's see here. I'm not going too crazy with this either. It's pretty simple. Okay, on the top here, I'm going to apply a little bit more wash. I already started kind of a little bit, but I'm just going to finish applying this. And I'm just gonna scrub that on.